You're listening to Walk Through Romans. My name is Leon DeHaan, and we are here teaching verse by verse through the book of Romans. And today we're in Romans, the 8th chapter, verse number 28. Now, verse number 28 is a very, very well-known verse in the Bible. And we're going to take a look at what it says. Now, some of the things that I'm going to share with you, you may not like, but you know what? I'm here not to teach you my dogma or to teach you what I believe. I'm here to teach you what the Word of God says. And so let's take a look at this verse. Romans 8, verse 28. And this is what it says, "For we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose." Now, what's the Apostle Paul talking about? Well, first, let's take a look at this word know. He says, "For we know." Now, what do we know? What does this word know mean? Now let me just say this to you. In the Greek language, there are several different Greek words that are translated into English as the word know. And this word here is the Greek word eido. Now you say, well, what does that mean? Well, let me tell you what it means. It means an intuitive knowledge. Now, let me say this. I believe that every person knows that God is a good God. Now, they may not surrender their life. I don't believe every person is going to heaven. I don't believe every person is in relationship with God. I don't believe every person knows God. But yet, every person has an intuitive knowledge of God. We can go all the way back to Romans, the first chapter, where the Apostle Paul talks about how nature is showing us God. And so when the Apostle Paul begins to write here, and he says, we know that God causes all things to work together for good. What's he talking about? He's talking about an intuitive knowledge, an intuition. I believe every person has an intuition. You know, let me just say this and we're going to go on. I believe that's why some people fight against Christianity so vehemently. It's because they know on the inside that what Christianity stands for is right, and they don't want to surrender to it. Now, let's continue on. The Apostle Paul says, we know that God causes. Now, that's the New American Standard Version. That's the way it is in the King James. That's the way it is in several versions of the Bible. But let me tell you something. The words God causes are not in the Greek text. In other words, the Apostle Paul did not write these two words, God causes. Now, one of the best translations of the Bible is the English Standard Version. And let me read this verse to you out of the English Standard Version, because I believe that the people that translated the English Standard Version translated this verse rightly, or correctly. And this is what the English Standard Version says. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. You see, the Apostle Paul here is not telling us that God causes all things. There's some people that believe that, well, God causes everything. You know what? That's simply not true. God doesn't cause death. God doesn't cause sickness. God doesn't cause tornadoes. God doesn't cause a lot of things that he gets blamed for. Sometimes I really feel sorry for God because people are blaming him for doing things he didn't do. Have you ever been blamed for doing something you didn't do? You see, we need to understand here that the Apostle Paul is not telling us that God causes all things. What he's telling us here is that God can take all things and turn them around for good. Now, going back to the English Standard Version, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Now, two things here that qualify you. First of all, you need to love God. If you want everything to turn out for your good, and by the way, the word good, it actually is the Greek word agathos, and it means something that's benevolent, something that's profitable, something that's useful. If you want to have a useful life, there's two things that you need to do. Number one, you need to love God. Now, this word love here is the Greek word agape. And it means to love to a point where you're surrendering, where you're giving of yourself to God. You see, this promise that God's going to take everything in your life and he's going to turn it around for good is only given to those who are saying, Jesus, I am committing my life. I love you to the point where I am committing my life completely, wholly to you. If you'll do that, you know what? God will begin to turn around all those things that were meant to harm you, and he will turn them for good. And then the Apostle Paul says this, who are called according to his purpose. What does it mean to be called? Well, here the Greek word is kletos, and it means to be invited, or it means to be appointed. You see, God has appointed every believer to his purpose. All those who love God, that's the first condition. All those who have committed their lives to God, what are they going to do? They are called to take part in what God is doing. One of those things, and probably one of the most important things, is leading people to Jesus. We are called to that place. So, we understand here that the Apostle Paul is telling us that if you love God, then you're called according to his purpose. And you know what? Nothing will be able to stop you from finishing the purpose of God in your life. God will turn things around for you. Maybe you're in a difficult place today. Love God. Commit yourself to God. Trust in him. And you know what? You're going to find purpose. And you know when you find that purpose, God's going to begin to turn those things out around for you and for your benefit, for your profitability, for your usefulness. Thank you for watching today. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow.